Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War battle report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Empire of Dust versus Varangur. This battle was fought at 2250 points, with the scenario being Taken Hold. First we start with my opponent's list, the Varangur player. We start out with two hordes of Warband, both of whom have swapped their shields out for two-handed weapons. Then we have two regiments of Thralls, followed by a troop of Knight Raiders who have throwing weapons instead of bows and the Jar of Four Winds, just to give them that 24-inch range. Then we have two regiments of Sons of Korgan, followed by two regiments of Mounted Sons of Korgan, one of whom has Brutal. I think actually both of them have Brutal. I think this was a mistake in my write-up. Then we have two Magi, both of whom have Banechant 2 along with Lightning Bolt 4, and I know one of those has the Inspiring Talisman. I think that's the other mistake I made here. Then we have a King on Chimera with Brutal and Blade of Slashing, and lastly a Scald. So yeah, this looks like a 22-20 list, but I'm pretty sure, I know that at least 20 of it is an Inspiring Talisman on one of those Magi, and I'm pretty sure the last one is just Brutal on the 2nd Regiment of Mounted Sons of Korgan. Now as for my thoughts on the list, I'm not sure. Given the meta that it's played in, my opponent here, it's a very small area that gets to play, or a very small pool that he's in, and none of it is very shooting heavy right now. There are no elves that he has played this list against, or his Varangur against, and I know for a fact he's never played against goblins. So sorry about my throat clearing, but yeah, so this is a very low defense list. And I think that a shooting skewed list would probably just tear it apart. But given that he doesn't really play against those, seems okay. I think that swapping out probably the Warbands or maybe the Thralls, for some of the speed elements in Varangur would probably be a better idea. And I think that he's trying to run like a real smash face list here. And I think that if he just swapped it to being the all the speed elements that Varangur have access to, I think that he'd be doing a little bit better. But otherwise, I think it's a solid, normal list. Moving on, here's my Empire of Dust list. Very little has changed, but just as a refresher, we have two hordes of Skeleton Warriors, one of whom has the Banner of the Griffin. Then we have a troop of Revenants that have swapped their shields out for two-handed weapons to get another round of crushing. Then I've taken out the Skeleton Regiment and put mummies in this time. Following that, we have a horde of Revenant Chariots, two Bone Giants, two Bone Dragons, a Cursed High Priest with Heal 4, along with his Surge 10, then the Idol of Shobik, and lastly, Mortibris. So, this is pretty much the same list as I ran last time, only without the Skeleton Regiment, and instead I brought the Mummies. They're almost exactly the same point cost in terms of what they do, and but I don't really like 10-point items in this kind of a list. It's pretty elite. I mean, it doesn't look like it. All my units are like, 150 points of skeleton trash and these weird, cheap value chariots, but it's really just about the monsters here. And they are all very high impact, I shall say. So yeah, the idea here is that I don't really want these small 5-point items scattered around the list. I don't think they add that much to these bigger units. So instead of just spending 10 points swapping the mummies from the Skeleton Regiment, I just didn't spend it. I also took the Fireheart off of my Cursed High Priest, so he cannot cast 2 spells in one turn this game, because I had this idea that I was going to spend 20 points on an item, like maybe the Caterpillar Potion on mummies or something, but in the end, I just didn't spend it, so this is actually a 20-30 point list. Moving forward, so Taken Hold is a mission where you place an objective in the center of the table, and then each of you and your opponent get 2 objectives each that you place on the opponent's side. So, for example, the 2 that I have are, well, they're going to be hard to see as they're those little clear tokens. So, for example, my opponent's token is in the left in that little piece of hay, and then there's one all the way to the right of, or to the left of my chariots, pretty much right in front of them. Those are the 2 that he's placed on my side of the table, while mine are right in front of that stone wall that is in front of his knights on the right, and then the other one is, I think, under where his center line has set up. I think that's where I put that one. But the idea here is that you move on to objectives, and starting on turn 3, you start scoring points off of them. Now, full disclosure, I don't actually own COC 2018, as it never showed up in the store. I mean, the store I'm in actually did have copies, but they're all sold out immediately. And so since I don't own it, I do know what the missions are. I have them written down, but I tend to defer to whenever my opponent actually has the book. I just go with whatever he says. And my opponent here was saying that the objectives are scored at the end of the game. So that is how we played it, but in this run through, I will actually I'll try to score the mission appropriately to see who actually won. So this will be a fun adventure for us all. So moving forward, we have my deployment. So starting from left to right, I have, actually, before we do that, let's talk about the terrain. So starting on the left there, we have a big impassable ziggurat. To the right of it, a little height 0 or height flat little straw field. Then in front of that, we have a forest with one giant tree in it. To the right of that, we have a simple hill. To the right of that, we have another forest with 4 smaller trees. To the right of that, we have a tower with it's a height 4 tower. Yeah, those woods are height 6, the hill is height 2. We have a height 4 tower and a height 1 wall next to it. And then I think to the right of me, there's another hill or maybe a forest. I'm not exactly sure, we'll see. So yeah, the table setup is pretty average. It's not helpful or harmful to any style of play. You could run a bunch of guns here, you could run melee, you could run a bunch of pathfinders. It's just not gonna hurt anyone. So with that in mind, here is my deployment. So I have actually I ended up revising this after the picture, but because my opponent ran out of drops and these were my last 2. So I ended up putting my zombies. My mummies actually are in front of the revenants, where right now in the picture, the revenants are in front of the mummies. But that's not what happened. To the right of that, we have the first skeleton warrior horde. The one in the front does not have the banner of the griffin. The one in the back does. Then to the right of that, we have a bone giant. To the right of him, the second bone giant. To the right of him, that alligator is Shobik. And then behind them, the 2 bone dragons, my high priest, and between that whole mess is where Mortibris is. So I decided that maybe it would be better off if Mortibris was in the center, making sure that his stealth bubble went onto the monsters and as much as I could. I can't get it onto everything given how my list works, so I just sacrificed the mummies and revenants to not have it. That said, my opponent doesn't have that much shooting, so it's not that big of a deal. Lastly, to the right of that, we finish off with my horde of chariots. Pretty happy with this deployment. Now, keep in mind, that was assuming that we score these objectives at the end of the game. But even with that, I think that this is pretty okay. The only thing I would do differently is move my mummies and the revenants to the left a little bit to make sure that I sit on that objective next to the ziggurat. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with it. We'll move forward with my opponent's deployment. So on the far left there, he has his first regiment of mounted sons of Gorgon. Then to the right of that, we have in front the first horde of Warband, I want to say those guys are. Behind them is the regiment of Thralls. And then to the right of that, we have his 2 sons of Gorgon on foot, the regiments in the front. Behind them, the second horde of Warband. Between those 2 deployments, I think is where his Scald and one of the Magi is. So then we have, to the right of that whole mess, we've got the second Magus. Then to the right of them, the second regiment of Thralls. To the right of them, those dwarf models, those are his Knight Band? Sorry, I'm not super familiar with the names here. And then lastly, we've got the second unit of mounted sons of Gorgon. All the way to the right is actually where his Chimera is. It's behind that building to the right, but I didn't get it in this picture. For my opponent's deployment here, I like it. I think it's pretty solid. Again, we were assuming that, or at least I was, that we were only going to be capturing these objectives at the end of the game. And I think with that in mind, this is pretty good. The only thing I would change is that on the right there, he has his Mounted Sons of Gorgon and then the Knight Band to their left. And I think that if you reverse those, the Mounted Sons of Gorgon can actually thread that gap between the wall and the forest in case they need to charge, and then the Knight Band can actually vanguard over to the wall, giving them cover. So I think those are the only things I would change. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty good deployment. Moving forward, so turn 1. Turn 1, this is just showing off... this is showing off the revised deployment. You can see on the left there, the mummies are now in front with the revenants behind them. So here is Empire of Dust turn 1. We definitely won that roll. And we just sort of meander forward. Shobik blocks my chariots, making sure that they... I can do the whole surge trick where they get a halt order and I surge the chariots forward so they don't take the -1 for shooting. But otherwise, everything just maintains the battle line and moves forward. I think I might have spread the dragons out a little bit. Who knows? Yep, showing off. I fired my chariot shots at the Night Raiders. They do have... Night Raiders must be what it is. Yeah, Night Raiders, they do have stealth, so I only hit on 6s. And I do, I think, 1 wound, but... you know, that's fine. There's not a whole lot of targets for me to shoot at right now, as his thralls are hidden by that forest. And that's the end of the turn for Empire Dust. Pretty low impact, but turn 1 melee undead. Not high on it. Here we see the Varangur advancing forward. So, yeah, he's pushed his left flank a lot farther forward. I think the idea here is that it's made up of those thralls and warband. He doesn't care versus the Sons of Korgan in the center. And I think that's a pretty wise idea. If you can get my mummies and or revenants to engage over there, then I have elite units fighting hordes of garbage, and then he can sweep in with his elite units and kill me before I get a counterattack. And at best, all I can do is counterattack with skeleton warriors, or I have to divert my monsters away from the right over to the left. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea. His mounted Sons of Korgan on the right there move over to the wall, and we knocked it down because originally he was going to place his unit on top of it, but he didn't want to be in charge range of the chariots, so instead he scooped them back a little bit, so they are directly behind the wall. Otherwise, yeah, I think some of his... Yeah, the Thrall walked over to the woods. They're not touching it quite yet, so I think the idea is just to reinforce something, but I don't know. I don't really like taking melee units and just staring at terrain that they can't see through. I mean, I could walk giants into the woods, but what are Thrall gonna do to giants? So, yeah. And we see over here his mounted king on a chimera. He actually ended up turning the chimera more towards center frame here, so towards the center of the chariots, because he wanted to make sure he could catch them no matter what. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that just turning it like I did here, because I helped him move this model, just staring at out to the center of the field, it lets him engage anything. It makes it so I have to be more careful with my monsters, and so on and so forth. But this is what he wanted to do, so that's what we did. With his shooting, he ends up doing 1 wound to my mummies with a lightning bolt. And I think he did 1 wound to Shobik with the other lightning bolt, or maybe to a giant with the other lightning bolt, but then the aura of Shobik healed it due to the Iron Resolve. So here we see turn 2, and apparently I forgot to take a picture of the die. But yeah, turn 2 for Empire of Dust. I've moved again into the center, the left side, because he pushed hard. I decided to just hold back. There's no reason for my mummies and revenants to engage yet, especially as I'd have to surge to do so. My skeleton warriors are actually perfectly out of charge range of everything he has. I don't really want to engage yet, like I just said, and with the unit strength I have, I don't really mind giving up the center, especially as, in my mind, we don't score these till the end of the game, so there's no reason to rush. But speaking of no reason to rush, I did move Shobik and a giant forward. The idea here is that Shobik can flank charge those thralls, and I did this, I don't know, I just sort of wanted to get some damage in, get the game rolling. So yeah, Shobik is, I marked out the frontage, because if you hit a corner, in case you were unaware, I've been hearing a lot of this from the Masters community, but if you surge into the corner of a unit, the side that you end up being on is the side that your center point was in when you did the surge. So you don't hit the corner and just choose. That is absurd. You hit the corner and have to go to the side that you're already in. So I moved Shobik over here to make sure that his center point is in their flank. So when I do this this surge, I will get a flank charge with it. Lastly, in the bottom right, I couldn't move the chariots, I couldn't crab them to the left far enough to get out of the charge range of his Chimera, so instead I just turned them to accept his charge. I don't really care if he charges into the chariots. I don't think he can drop them. They're currently inspired, and they have the Banner of the Griffin perfectly in range. And if he does it, I've turned my Bone Dragons away so they can't countercharge, but you know, the thing about surging is that people tend to forget that you can do it. So I'll just turn the Bone Dragons around and flank charge them if I need to. Yeah, there's the turn 2 die. Good job, Riley. So yeah, this is the end of the turn. Shobik did succeed at getting that flank charge and blows right through the Thrall. Feel good about that. It probably wasn't my finest moment, but I just wanted to do it. Especially as I would get rear charged by those knights if I failed. Pretty bad. But yeah, he just turns back towards the knights again. And I think I fired my chariots at his king on Chimera and did, you know, no wounds. But meh. I did need to surge with both Mortibris and my High Priest onto Shobik to make that charge, so that was my only spell. And we move forward to Varangur turn 2. So Varangur turn 2 here, we see he's moved forward with his Thrall regiment on the left there through his horde of Warband, and you know, that's a pretty solid idea. Always keep your chaff behind and let them move forward when you actually need them, as opposed to putting them in front and just getting them killed. Granted, you want to do the inverse against a shooting army, but I'm not one of those, so pretty good move by my opponent there. Then, furthermore, on the left, he's rolled the knights around to make sure he gets that charge onto the mummies or revenants, whatever, you know, rears its head. And then he takes the center by moving the Horde of Warband over his mounted son, or not his mounted sons, but just the regular Sons of Korgan to take over that center objective. Currently, his unit strength on the center objective isn't all that great, as I'm actually at 4 due to the giant, but in the center objective is that little black die top, or die box top, but there's a little black circle inside of it, that's what we're measuring from. So, on the right, he does send his king on Chimera into my chariots, but there's a hill right there where he's going to land, so he's just going to chill out actually on the hill, as, you know, top-heavy models, they're metal. That's not going to work out. And lastly, he sends the other mounted Sons of Korgan on the right there into the Idol of Shobik. This is worrisome. He could spike dice and walk right through me, especially with a Bane chant, so yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. And yep, just showing off that he gets the charge here. And getting the charge here, yeah, he's nowhere near his actual resting point, but you get the gist of it. Yeah, this charge, he only manages to do 5 wounds to the Idol of Shobik, and that is due to a big part, due to his Magus failing Bane chant. So he only wounds me on 3s, or no, he actually wounds me on 4s. I'm sorry, because he's hindered due to that wall that he hid behind. So yeah, he's -1 to hit. He's hindered. It's, you know, 4s and 4s. Even with that many attacks, it's unlikely that he'll bust through me. He does actually do a 6th wound to me, but due to my Iron Resolve, I heal 1, and this is the result. Over here, the King on Chimera does 6 wounds to my chariots. I'm not sure that's all that bad. It's not good, that's for sure, as the King on Chimera has like 15 attacks or some nonsense, hitting on 3s with Elite, and then the Blade of Slashing, and then wounding me on 2s. So yeah, this wasn't the hottest roll ever, but and he either does 6 wounds, oh no, I don't have Iron Resolve. Yeah, so he actually does the 6 wounds here. And this is the end of the turn. So at the end of turn 2, I have a solid center here with my Skeleton Warriors taking over. He has ended up doing 3 wounds to my Skeleton Warriors using his Night Raiders and I think a Lightning Bolt, but I'm probably just going to heal that back, so it's not a big deal. But, so I've taken up the center, my opponent is pulling back a little bit, and I think that's definitely to his detriment, because I want to make sure that a unit dies immediately when I charge it. I want to surge into your flank and remove your unit, while he is Varangur are definitely more of a brawler force, where they're just going to take a punch, deliver a punch. They don't care, like, they're good at alpha, they're good at taking it, right? They're just solid. So I think that being this lacking aggression was sort of a bad idea when playing against a force like mine here. So turn 3. Start of turn 3, so we see some charges on the left there. I charge my Revenants and Mummies into his Thralls because there's just no stopping his Mounted Sons of Korgan from getting into me. That little secret weapon pigment container there, that is marking the fact that I am hindered on the charge against his Thralls. Then I send my Skeleton Warriors and 1 Bone Giant into the centermost Warband, the ones on the hill. Just hoping to, you know, I'd love to break him here, but I don't think that's all that likely, as they're a 21-23. Skeleton Warriors are not good in a fight, and Giants are pretty random. So I'm just looking to gum them up, keep them off the center. Then we have on my right, in the top right, I send the Shobik in a countercharge into his Knights, and he is joined by one of my Bone Giants, the other one. I move both my Bone Dragons around, one to stare at the Knights, just because I don't think, you know, Shobik and the Giant, again, they could walk through these Knights in one round, but it's definitely not an assured thing. So I get the Dragon over there just to make sure of it. And then the other Dragon turns towards his Chimera because, yep, I'm definitely going to go for that double surge into him. So that's the plan. Lastly, I've got the 2 Wizards just hanging out with my Banner the Griffin guy because, you know, screw having Inspiring anywhere. Why bother? So, I mean, Shobik is very inspiring, so all my monsters are inspired, it's just the skeletons that are not. And we move forward, so showing off the charge, and this charge, and that one, and that one. Yep, I do end up getting the surge here. I actually do it in one go with just my High Priest, so I was pretty far away. I needed like a 6 or a 7, but I get it. Which frees up Mortibris to give Banechant onto my Chariots. I end up doing a total of 10 wounds versus his King on Chimera with my Bone Dragon and Chariots combined. And I think that's pretty okay. I mean, the Chariots have 16 attacks on 4s and 4s due to their Banechant, so they get about 4 wounds through. And then the Bone Dragon has 18 attacks on 4s and 2s. So what is that? Like 7 more? So, you know, a little below average, but still fine. I do not get a wavered or a break here, so that King on Chimera is ready to fight. This is one of the things, my opponent took Brutal on all of his Sons of Korgan, and while I do think, I love Brutal. Brutal's such a good rule, but honestly, I think that you should just take Fury. Mathematically, it's just better to make sure that when you're wavered, you still charge, than to get that +1 on the break. But, you know, you do what you want. Over here, my Skeleton Warriors and the Mighty Giant, they actually do quite a few wounds to the Warband here, even though my Giant rolled only 1 extra attacks with this d6 +6. And I end up getting the waiver. It's pretty lucky. I think they have 10 wounds on them, so I must have rolled an 11 or a 12. But yeah, I get the waiver. Feeling good. I heal the 1 wound back due to Life Leech. And then, well, looks like some of the pictures were missed here. On the left, my Revenants and Mummies actually only wavered his Thralls in the front there. That's not that bad, as I don't want that Warband Horde to be able to charge, and currently his Thralls are blocking him up from being able to do that, so that was lucky. But on the right, the Shobik and other Giant end up doing a few wounds to his Knights, but I think they roll a little under average. Again, my Giant only rolls 1 extra attack, so, but I do get the waiver. So I'm just wavering all these units. I wavered 3 this turn out of a possible 4, and 2 of those were even good. So the Warband in the center and the Thralls slightly to the left fighting those Mummies, those are great waivers. And as I said before, we will try to keep track of my points here. So I have the center objective, because I have my Giant and Skeleton Warriors on it. Then I have the right objective by my Chariots. Then I don't have the bottom objective, which I should have gone for. So I am sitting on 2 points to my opponent's 0. And here we see Varangur turn 3. So since most things are wavered, on the left he ends up getting his Mounted Sons of Korgan into the flank of my Revenant troop. That's not that big of a deal to me, as, you know, it's a troop of Revenants. It's only 85 points. They're gonna die. So, yeah, he gets those guys in. and then not much else. I mean, he's sort of stuck behind his own lines due to that all those waivers I got. So yeah, he just sort of turns to make sure he gets his spacing right and gets the counter charges he can. So he gets those Mounted Suns into the side of the Revenants, and his King on Chimera goes back into my Chariots, who are sitting on 5 wounds due to them life leeching one of their wounds off last turn. And yep, just showing off that charge, and this one, boom. And at the end of the combat, yeah, he only does 4 more wounds to me. That is atrocious. So he only does 4 more wounds to me, and fails to roll that 9. Although I also did not inspire this unit or give them Banner the Griffin. So yeah, good time for my opponent to roll poorly, in my opinion. Yeah. But here, the Mounted Sons of Korgan walk right through my Revenants, and bleh, they say goodbye. So at the end of the turn, my opponent is sitting on the one of the center objectives by the hill to the right of his Sons of Korgan, and then sitting on that one and nothing else, it looks like. Yeah, because I still hold the center. So it is currently a 2-1 in my favor. And we move on to turn 4. So turn 4, ooh, this is an out of order picture. Yeah, I end up charging into his thralls again with my mummies, and I roll a double 1. So they are again not even, though they're not even wavered. I hate that double 1 rule, and it's not like, I actually like the fact that, you know, there's a good chance that you won't break, and I think it's very thematic. I love it. The part I don't like is that it lets the unit activate. In this case, it's thralls, so I don't really care that they get an extra activation, but most units, like, even with these guys, because they can charge, they're going to open up his warband to be able to charge the flank of my skeleton warriors. Were that a bigger unit, like, I've definitely had tournaments where I've charged into bigger combat units like Grotesques, and then rolled that double 1, and then they get to charge back into me. I just think that you should be auto-wavered if you roll the double 1 and it's above your leadership. Stay on the board, continue doing stuff. Even if it said you couldn't charge, I'd be okay with it, because you're already disordered, right? Anyway, that's my tirade. Over here, I charge my Skeleton Warriors and Giant into the warband that they had wavered the turn before, and they walk right through them. So I just roll forward as my Skeleton Warriors. I actually did the mummies first. This is the correct order. So I did the mummies first. I rolled the double 1. I realized that the Skeleton Warriors, no matter what, are getting flank charged. So I just roll closer to make sure it happens closer to his line so I can take that center point more. Over here, Shobik and his Giant, and a Dragon this time. Actually, that Dragon did not participate in the combat. I just moved him over here, and then, just in case I wanted to go for the Surge, and I ended up not. Shobik and the Giant finish off those Mounted Sons of Korgan that they were fighting last turn. Shobik rolls forward, while the Giant turns back towards the center of the field. And oof, yeah, so because that King on Chimera failed to break me, I get another flank charge with my Dragon, and I get a front charge with the Chariots, and I walk right through this guy. You can see that the Chariots are sitting on 5 wounds. That is because I cast Heal on them with at least one of these guys, with either Mortibris or the Cursed High Priest, and I heal 3, and then they life leech 1. And at the end of turn 4, I am still sitting on the center objective, so I've got that one locked. My Chariots are still within 3 of that bottom right objective. Shobik and the Giant are within 3 of the top right objective. And then I am not within 3 of any of the other objectives. So I'm going to gain, 3 extra points. So it is a 5-1 game right now. And we move forward to my opponent's turn 4. So, yeah, given that I'm kind of dominating the right flank, like, it's not even kind of, I am dominating the right flank, and the center is still a throw-up, my opponent has a lot of work to do here. And so he decides to charge smartly with the thralls into my mummies, and the flank of my mummies with his Mounted Sons, because I rolled that double 1. And then he gets the flank charge into my Skeleton Warriors with his Warband, and that seems pretty normal. I mean, that was going to happen. And here's the problem here, is that the 2 Sons of Korgan unit, they don't both want to charge these Skeleton Warriors. They don't both need to. I did heal them. They're at full health, but he wants to get at least the rightmost unit into my giant. Unfortunately, his units are too close together. So when he tries to turn, he can't complete the wheel. He can't complete his wheel to be able to get to my giant without being in either his unit or my unit. So instead, they both have to charge my skeleton warriors, as the giant is just slightly behind where the skeleton warriors ended up advancing to. So that's unfortunate for him. Lastly, we have his Knight Raiders just stepping up and deciding to slay Shobik themselves, going into the side of him. And his wizards are just sort of meandering about, probably going to shoot at some dragons. Yeah, showing off that combat, and this one, and that one. And yeah, at the end of this combat, he doesn't even wound... No, he does one wound to Shobik. I just Iron Resolve it back. And yeah, easily dispatches that skeleton warrior horde. I mean, what are you going to do against that amount of power? And he's currently turning back towards the giant. And these guys kill off my mummies, which is unfortunate for me. You know, double one's cost. And at the end of the turn, my opponent is within 3 of the center objective with 4 unit strength, but I also have 4 unit strength within 3, so no point there. He is within 3 of another objective that is sort of behind the hill somewhere over there. It's really hard to see. It's actually right in front of his painted wizard. If you look at the, you know, between the wizard and his unpainted Sons of Korgan on the hill there, you can see a slight shimmer. That's where that one is. And he's within 3 of that, so he gets 1 point. And then nothing else though, because I've got the bottom right and the top right. So my opponent's sitting on 1 extra point, and it is currently 5-2 in my favor. So we move on to turn 5. And turn 5, yeah, so I send Shobik back into his Knight Raiders. My chariots just move on top of the objective, just to make sure that they can help out on the left in case we get a turn 7. I move my dragon that helped them out to their left, just in case I want to do a weird surge play for that objective at the bottom. And I send my skeleton warriors with the Banner of the Griffin actually do have a flank charge onto his Sons of Korgan on the hill, the painted guys. So I definitely take that. I don't think I necessarily, like, I don't expect them to kill off a Sons of Korgan unit regiment, even in 2 rounds, even with the flank. But I just need them to get in the way to make sure that the center objective is currently being held up. I do send both my giants into his Sons of Korgan on the hill, and I move my Bone Dragon over. They look like they're not fighting him. That's just because that hill is making it so my metal models won't move on to it. And my Bone Dragon is actually where it is right now, because I'm going to go for another flank surge. This picture was not the final movement. I think either Mortibris or my Cursed High Priest move forward because they need to actually search that dragon. So, yep, just showing off that charge, and this one, and that one. And yeah, you can see the Bone Dragon does make it in with a, oof, it wasn't even that long of a surge, but I'm rolling pretty hot on my surge dice, and I roll like 8 successes or some crazy amount. It looks like the Cursed High Priest was the one that went for it. So yeah, he gets in there. Both my Bone Dragons are in there. It's not looking pretty. And yeah, Shobik walks right through those Knight Raiders, who would have guessed, but stays within 3 of the objective. Then the double Bone Giant plus Dragon easily dispatch that Mounted Sons of Korgan unit. Or not Mounted Sons, I keep saying that because it's so natural. But yeah, the Sons of Korgan unit, they walk right through them. The Bone Dragon should have backed up onto the objective that's right in front of that wizard, but I didn't think about it. And my skeletons, I actually did, yeah, Mortibris goes for a Bane Chant onto my skeleton warriors fighting the Sons of Korgan in the flank, and they do quite a few wounds, like far more than I thought they were going to, but they still don't remove them. But at the end of the round, he has mere 2 unit strength to my 4, I believe, on the center objective, while my chariots also at the bottom, and I have the top right with Shobik, so that's gonna give me another 3 points. So we are sitting on a, what is that, an 8-2 in my favor. So yeah, not looking pretty for my opponent. And here we see my opponent's turn 5. His Sons of Korgan go into the front of my Banner of the Griffin Skeleton Warriors. It looks like I wavered again the Sons of Korgan, the non-mounted Sons of Korgan, and they are blocking up his Warband from being able to charge. So you know, this battle goes out to all the waivers out there. Lastly, his wizards just sort of move around, just staring at some dragons again. And yep, they go for the lightning bolt, plus the Scald throws an axe at my dragon, doing 3 wounds, which is not enough for a roll. And after fighting with his Mounted Sons of Korgan, he ends up doing 9 wounds to my skeleton warriors, so pretty good, but not enough to actually do, you know, for lasting damage, so they'll still be there. Turn 6. Oh, actually, let's roll back here. So my opponent is now on no objective, so he is sitting at 0 points this turn, so it is an 8-2 still. Turn 6. So, turn 6, mostly we just sort of meander about. The chariots just sit on their objective. Shobik stays back by his. I move a giant over to the objective by his wizard, and I charge his non-mounted Sons of Korgan, the normal Sons of Korgan, in the flank with a giant, and in the flank with my skeleton warriors. I don't really care if his mounted sons and the warband kill off these units. I'm just trying to make sure that I get scenario points right now. Lastly, my bone dragon that got shot at by lightning bolt did not like that and goes after one wizard just to show him what's what. And at the end of my turn, I end up killing off that Sons of Korgan unit in the center of the table. And well, looks like I did not kill off his wizard with my bone dragon, which is a shame. But I do a few points of damage there. I think I went for a surge on the... No, I did not. Mortibris went for Bane Chant on my skeleton warriors to make sure I dropped the unit. So at the end of the turn, I have control of the center objective. I have control of the objective in front of my bone giant not on the hill. I have control of the objective Shobik is by, excuse me. And then I have control of the objective the chariots are on. So that is 12 points. So it is currently 12-2. And oof, things are looking ugly. Here's my opponent's turn 6. He's, going for guts and glory. The warband horde, charge into my bone giant, while the mounted Sons of Korgan go after the Banner of the Griffin unit. They're only sitting on 2 damage, so he's gonna have to roll pretty well to walk right through them. So, yep. And I think his wizard, the wizard countercharged into my bone dragon off on the left there, while the other wizard and Skull just sort of stared, I think, at my cursed high priest to try to nab some points there. Yep, definitely going for that charge. And at the end of the turn, yeah, he actually rolls insane for that mounted Sons of Korgan, which I have not been remarking of in this game so far, but those mounted sons have only missed 6 attacks this entire game, and they've been in a lot of combat, so it's very surprising. Yeah, he rolls right through my Banner of the Griffin unit, but the warband fail to do any real damage to my giant, so, I mean, they did 8 damage to it, but they don't kill it. And this is the end of turn 6. We roll to see if there's going to be a turn 7, but there is not. So we tally up the points. At the end of his turn, my opponent does have control of the center objective, so he gets +1 point there, and ends up with a, what is that, a 3 to 12? Yeah, like a 3 or either 4 or 3, but yeah, I think my opponent has 3 points, I have 12, and it's a pretty resounding victory for me. And in our original scoring, we thought that I had Shobik and the chariots on 2 and my bone giant on 3 objectives, while he had the center objective, so we thought it was a 3-1 victory for the Empire of Dust, but yeah, going by the actual scenario, it's even worse. Now, with this game, I'm pretty happy. I like this Empire of Dust list. I think it performs well. I've been playing variations of it for a very long time, since the beta of Empire of Dust, but I think most Empire of Dust players sort of keyed in on the fact that the monsters are really the point, and at 2250, it actually gives me enough points to run Shobik, which makes me happy. At 2000 points, I often wonder to myself, why am I not just playing normal undead? I think that, I mean, that's a discussion for a different time, but yeah, I'm very happy with this army. I think my opponent could probably do with, just playing more games if he wants to be more competitive, which is not the goal for everyone. Maybe this person just wants to play more games. But yeah, I'm very happy with the result, and I hope to see you next time.